So now that Valve has unveiled their newest line of hardware products with the new Steam Machine GameCube, the Steam controller, and the Steam frame, I suddenly remembered that I have a VR headset collecting dust in my closet, and I decided to try it out again to remember how it is. VR was all the hype over a decade ago when Palmer Luckey presented his prototype of the Oculus Rift. Finally, a viable VR solution for gaming, after all we had was the... At least until he shot everyone in the balls by selling out to Facebook, of all companies. Yes, Facebook, that notorious video game company, right? No, not that slimy corporation owned by a bizarre toucan with a giant schnoz who barely looks human. The company that sells your data to God knows who and bombards you with brain rot and ads. One of the shitty social media sites responsible for ruining humanity's mental health, I might add. No, it couldn't be that one. What sense would that make? Oh, well... But yeah, that wasn't enough to kill VR, because the normie consumers would never have enough brain cells to avoid Facebook's Zogslop, and the Redditors who had already invested their entire hopes for the future in VR because they hate their lives in the real world would never jump off that ship. They also swore that VR was amazing, that it felt like they were teleported to another place when they slid that crap on their heads, being the most impressionable midwits in the world. But is it really all that?
Nope.
You would think that if it really was, then gaming would have been revolutionized. Regular flat screens would be dumped and everybody would switch to VR, right? At least there would be as much fuzz as there is right now with AI, right? Even though AI isn't really all that. But no, about 2% of PC gamers own a VR headset, and that figure is higher for all platforms combined. But 2% is also around the number of players who played Resident Evil 4 VR compared to its regular counterpart's player base. And that's on PSVR, by the way, with a much broader adoption than PC VR. So it's safe to say that about 4% of gamers use VR actively, meaning at least once a month. The truth is, VR isn't all that exciting. It provides some short-lived excitement with the novelty of how everything looks up to scale and has depth, but it still feels fake. And that feeling of fakeness doesn't get better as resolution increases either. The experience isn't convincing enough to outweigh all the inconveniences that come with VR. So first, excuse my absence as I was visiting family abroad, and without further ado, let's get into the meat of the video. First, let's go over some of these inconveniences, alright? Beginning with the most annoying thing about the VR industry, there's no truly good VR headset yet. There are a lot of side grades, but none of them so far have satisfied the conditions for giving a truly enjoyable VR experience. I'm talking about specs here, and no, the Steam frame does not have very good specs either, unfortunately. It has 4K resolution, something that VR headsets have had for a long time now. It has an LCD screen, which means no true darkness, and that's a big deal in VR for the visuals. Look, on paper it's simple. All that is needed is a headset with these specs. 5K resolution at least for minimal screen door effect, an FOV of 110 degrees at least, OLED panels for true darkness, aspheric lenses so there's minimal glare and God rays. It can't weigh over a pound on your head. It needs to properly isolate your eyes from outside lights. It has to be untethered so the cable isn't an issue. It needs good speakers like the Valve Indexes, or at least speakers that properly reach your ears, and at least 2 hours of battery life. Every single headset on the market does not have these features in combination. I've searched. This should have been available a long time ago already. Put these features together and you have an actual good upgrade instead of all the shitty side grades. But it seems like an impossibility for some reason. There are many headsets that come close, but they all have 1, 2, or 3 of these features missing, so it's almost comical. There are micro OLED headsets, but the only ones that show promise have 8K resolution, so they cost like $2,000 or more. Or take this piece of shit, for instance, which is 5K, has OLED panels, but it has insane amounts of glare in the lenses, so the visual experience sucks. Not to mention that it's tethered. It doesn't come with controllers, so you'll have to buy the Lighthouse system from Valve, so get ready to spend $400 to $500 extra. These Pimax headsets are all tethered, so you're gonna have to deal with the cable unless you install a pulley system on your ceiling, but who in their right mind would do that? But it's also Pimax, so it's guaranteed slop. This Play for Dream headset has insanely bad audio, and it's also very uncomfortable with slim to no options of adjustability for the thing on your head. And it's also from a Chinese company, so enjoy your spyware. Lots of headsets from these Chinese companies and startups are not available at retail stores like Amazon, so you have to order them from their shitty sites, many of them not being available outside of the US or Europe. Do you see what I mean? It's like a curse. It's not like we have to wait until 8K is cheap. So what gives? Something that I almost forgot to mention is how you need a beefy PC to run VR at the high resolutions it requires to reach 90 FPS minimum, otherwise it fucking sucks to look at, and VR is pretty damn ugly if you try it at lower resolutions. But needless to say, the average guy won't have that powerful rig. So yeah, the bar of entry is pretty high already, especially with how expensive hardware is getting because of fucking AI. Next, there's the issue of motion sickness. This might be one of the biggest reasons why the VR user base is so tiny. I don't have it. I've never felt motion sick in my life, not even once. So I don't even know what it feels like, but a lot of people do. I have a friend who can't move for 5 minutes in VR without feeling like he's gonna die from the nausea. He bought his headset, used it for a day, and then never again. In fact, over half the people who've tried VR have reported that they felt motion sickness. Wowie zowie. Well, but you just have to get your VR legs. Oh brother, get real now. Who the fuck is gonna spend 2 months or however long it takes training to overcome VR motion sickness just to play one good game, which is all VR has, Half-Life Alyx, and maybe Beat Saber, which is just a rhythm game? Only the super turbo autists. I'd like to imagine nobody would spend weeks getting over their motion sickness just to unironically experience the sheer horror of VR chat to make lots of creepy, furry, Looney Tune virtual friends.
I'm just actually fucking frustrated, okay? I need VR chat to help me mentally keep myself stable in that department.
But I'm sure subhumans like that exist, so stay the hell away from me, you freaks.
I need to look for a new VR mom and VR dad.
How old are you?
27.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Those who use glasses would need to get prescription inserts for their headsets, as putting them on their heads with the glasses on would scratch the lenses and ruin them. One more gigantic portion of the population, most of who are just not gonna bother with VR. Then, if you're a PC gamer and you just want to play your PC games right off the bat, with the exception of the Valve Index, which is already pretty outdated, and the Steam Frame in the future, with most headsets you'll have to deal with the bloat that comes with them. For instance, whenever you turn on your Zuck Quest, you have to pass through their shitty Oculus Home, or whatever it's called. You'll have to install Virtual Desktop in your headset and your PC, set that up, which requires a good router in the same room that you're gonna game in, so your PC can encode the image to your headset through Wi-Fi without hiccups caused by network usage. Then you'll have to launch Steam VR from it, and only then will you be able to enjoy your PC games. This makes it so the settings for the headset are all in different places. It's not neatly packaged into one place anymore. It's a total clusterfuck. So unless you're planning on getting one of Valve's headsets, then I hope you like problem solving more than gaming. And speaking of gaming, VR has no games. Obviously, I'm being facetious here, but the selection of games is simply awful. Most VR games suck, simple as that. Only Half-Life Alyx is really good, and Beat Saber, which is a rhythm game that's mostly used as exercise by the people who can't be bothered to go to a gym or jog around the block. Everything else is mostly slop. VR chat is not even a game, it's a breeding ground for the mentally ill and the vile.
Wait, so you got scared, so you started saying you put bruises on kids and put them in the hospital and then start like doing things to 8-year-old kids? Like, why, if you were scared, why would you make a lie about that? And like, I already know that you were on like house arrest twice and you got arrested for it.
That was a lie. People don't understand my disability. How am I a pedophile if I'm hanging out with minors? Just hanging out.
Yeah, you're just...
I'm like a therapist to them.
Yeah,
they feel my energy.
or like a mother figure. Well, I don't understand.
Rummaging through a sea of shit to find something interesting that is not even a gem, but just decent, is a major inconvenience in my book. Ask online on Reddit for recommendations, and once you get past all the cringe upvoted quote-unquote humor posts, you find lists of games they swear the science are good, but are actual trash when you try them out. Then you're forced to go on a journey to find a good game. So excluding Half-Life Alyx and Beat Saber, here's a bunch of short impressions of VR VR games that I've played, which aren't complete shovelware tier garbage. Boneworks is an FPS with heavy physics puzzle solving gameplay, kinda sandboxy, with an interesting premise but terrible presentation. You're basically dropped in a museum that pretty much tells you directly, it addresses you, the player, and spoon feeds everything you need to know about the gameplay, the physics, and yada yada, without it being ingrained in the universe, so you learn these things organically and coherently, so it's a total immersion breaker. It has a bunch of fun little gimmicks you can play with, and it's fun for like 1 hour, then the novelty fades away, and since there's no interesting plot or interesting characters which would hook the player and make us want to know more, it just gets boring really quickly. Instead, it packs up all these puzzles one after the other right at the beginning, which tells the player pretty much all the game has to offer, and then the rest is pretty much more of the same. It's inferior to Half-Life Alyx in every way except for the fact that you can use melee weapons in this game. Oh, and it has some painfully janky physics, man. Fuck this game, I'm out.
I did nothing wrong. I did everything correct, legally. Now I get fucked.
Alien Rogue Incursion is an action horror game, quote unquote, where you play as a black queen. So yeah, shut up and listen, white boy. It's a UE5 game, so it runs like absolute fucking dog shit. The game looks decent in the recording, but in game it looks awful, extremely ugly. Since it's UE5, you'll most likely need to lower the graphics in order to run it at 4K, assuming you have a 4K or better headset. So the game looks extremely ugly and blurry. Your only options for anti-aliasing are UE5's terrible TAA and TSR, which make the game blurry, as you may already know, because that's how it is in regular games as well. And if you use FXAA, it barely does anything to the aliasing, so the edges look aliased still, and they flicker a lot. The game manages to look pretty bad even when the lighting is dim, which is completely insane in VR. These are the places where it looks the best, but that's the power of UE5 for you. This game crashed several times thanks to UE5. Thanks a lot to all the Jeets who made this possible. It almost makes me feel like going to India to visit their technological utopia, dude. It must be heaven on earth because their tech is just that good, man. They're such good tech wizards, man. Oh, how I love this engine. It has this horrible issue where the camera passes out and flickers in your face, so you can imagine how great that feels in VR. It has texture glitches, like nobody playtests this shit in VR, and you can see that in how poorly it's doing in the reviews. Madison VR is a spooky, scary horror game. It looks good because the environments are not very well lit, and that's where VR's visuals shine. It's made in Unity, so it doesn't run like fermented dog feces like some other engine we all know. It's yet another hallway slop walking sim PT clone with an extremely similar setting and an annoying protag who won't stop whimpering like a little puppy about his situation.
What the hell has Dad been doing here?
When a demon attaches itself to a human.
Demons?
It
This can't be happening. This storm must have taken out the power.
Oh, what next?
All you do is fumble with every little thing in the environment until you find key items to put in the right place. Square goes in square hole and blah blah. Now, I know I just described 90% of horror games, but this one takes it to another level. It has that old escape room flash game level of meticulousness in how you have to look at every nook and cranny to find the items you need. And then the jump scares. There are so many. It's so stupid. This is the first horror game I've played in VR, and I'd heard so much fuzz about how horror in VR is so much more scary, and yeah, for like the first 10 minutes I guess, but it's really not all that. At least in this game, it's just scripted thing after scripted thing, and it gets really predictable. Yes, right in my face, come on, really close. Yep. This is so stupid. Yeah, another jump scare. Wowie zowie. Sure love walking.
Exciting gameplay.
Okay, this way. As you can see, I am very scared right now. Just walking is very scary, dude.
What a shame.
Like, don't attempt to make a horror game, you hacks, if all you can do to scare people is cheap-ass, ridiculous jump scares one after the other. Jeez. Pistol Whip is a pretty decent written game. At least the gameplay is. Shooting things and dodging billions of bullets while you flail around like a fool IRL is pretty fun. But the music, God, it's so bad. It's just Skrillex wannabes. It's electronic club music, you know, the places that were utterly obliterated by COVID lockdowns. And good riddance, I say. Imagine going to a place to hang out with your friends, but each time you want to talk, you have to scream so loud, your vocal cords get torn apart, and you have to repeat what you said 5 times, because the mouth droolers who go to these places don't have any hearing left from being exposed to lethally loud levels of shitty trap and trance music. They could have put synthwave, drum and bass, or even some chiptune keyjan music, and it would make more sense, and it would be better than this repetitive garbage that's made to drill repeatedly into your head and make your brain leak from your ears. No wonder this game did best on the Oculus platform, since the midwit masses are the most fine prey for the Juden's nose. But even then, it's just a rhythm game, which normies play for a bit, then drop it, and all that's left is the ultra-autismal people. It's a game without much substance. Now the rest of the library is mostly shovelware, as you've seen. Things on the level of streamer bait shit, but in VR, playing silly shit like that is worse. You got roguelikes, you got rhythm games, you got shitty, janky, streamer bait horror games like Phasmophobia. I don't know about you, but this trash is not capable of immersing me in their worlds. To me, these games all feel like glorified minigames, the likes of Mobile Slop that ultra normies love to play while scrolling through Facebook or Instagram. And at this point, then why even bother with VR? None of these games are even made to be immersive in the first place. You can't just slap some crap in VR and call it a game and expect it to be immersive just because it's in VR, dude. You got party games like Rec Room. Yeah, if you're looking for real games in this medium, good luck. A lot of VR games are just existing games refitted for VR, out of which pretty much none are worth anyone's time. It's fun for just half an hour to revisit games you're familiar with, just to see what it looks like in a 3D space and lifelike proportions, but that's it. It's not worth the hassle of setting everything up and putting that thing on your head, heating up your face, getting all sweaty and with a headache and maybe nausea if you have motion sickness, just to experience something you already know, again, for anything more than the brief novelty, I guess. Most of these games were not made for VR to begin with, so the result of the refitting is just sloppy. Also, don't forget the fact that once Facebook got their slimy toucan hands on the Oculus company, they introduced platform exclusivity to VR games on PC. This did, oh gosh, wonders to the already barren library, didn't it? Goy Book bringing that shit to PC gaming was egregious. I don't care that the Quests are now standalone headsets. At first, the Oculus Rift was a tethered headset. And what's this? Look, it's Robo Recall, one of the better games allegedly, on the Epic Store, a PC games platform. But wait a sec, what is this? Get an Oculus? Oh, yeah, there you have it. Thanks so much, Facefuck, for stunting this fucking medium, I guess. Wow, without an Oculus, you're gonna have to set up a bunch of shit, none of which 95% of people who have VR on another platform are gonna bother with. Now, I wanted to play Robo Recall and also Asgard's Wrath to give you my impressions, which is also one of the best rated VR games, but they're Oculus exclusives, dog. I'm not gonna go through the humiliation ritual of finding a totally legal free copy because I won't give my money to fucking golems who sold out and agreed to make games exclusive to the platform owned by this thing, and then do the whole compatibility setup with Revive just to play VR slop. Especially not when I have to install the crappy Oculus software to spy on my PC. Fuck no. Well, these are some of the inconveniences that VR presents. Needless to say, to me, it's not worth it. And all the quests and indexes and Vives collecting dust in 96% of gamers' closets also agree with me. But it's not over yet, because we still haven't gone through all the limitations of VR. This is a big one because the limitations of this medium have a real bad impact on immersion. The point of VR is to fully immerse you in a virtual world with full depth perception and scale to make you believe it's real, so you get that presence feeling where your brain and body react to things in VR as if they were really there. And it really does that sometimes. It's a lizard brain thing, like unconsciously hesitating to jump down a hole in VR and all. That's fine. However, that is only one facet of immersion that VR can provide uniquely. The problem is the rest of the immersion is considerably worse than what you get in regular games. Since VR raises the bar with its visuals, we get much closer to an uncanny valley of sorts. Because of this, every little thing that doesn't look right, or sound right, or feel right, results in an immersion break. That would take you much farther away from the experience than the ones that happen in regular games. All the time, you're reminded you're in a game, and so it's very hard to take these games seriously. Probably why VR has so little retention. Presence then becomes nothing more than a gimmick. Everybody put so much importance on it and forgot that immersion is the point, not just presence. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a big disparity between the visuals and everything else, but it's not as if the visuals leave nothing to be desired either. So beginning with them, I'll go over some of these limitations. The visuals are the main attraction of VR, but they're really not there yet. Visually, VR introduces depth perception and scale, which is enough to create presence, but there's something lacking in the visual department, something that would make everyone be 100% convinced they are in the game's world, if no one told them it's just a game. What I see is, when I put a VR headset on my head, is a sort of veil between me and the game world. After all, that is utterly the case in the headset. You're just looking through some lenses at two flat screens, so in the end, it doesn't really feel real. It's enough to cause presence thanks to the depth perception and scale, but it just doesn't feel like you're really there. Switching to higher resolutions doesn't make this veil go away. It was there in the Oculus DK1 just as much as on the Index and on the Quest 3. You can just tell you're looking at a flat screen a few inches away from your eyeballs behind some lenses. Field of view doesn't matter too much for immersion. It's like putting a diving mask or a helmet IRL. Limiting your FOV doesn't really make the world seem less real, so it shouldn't matter in VR either. It's just an annoyance when it's narrow. The only problem is that if your headset has an LCD display like the frame will have, you can see the difference in black levels between the edges of the FOV and the game. That makes it so obvious you're looking at a screen. Too bad all the affordable headsets that have OLED and decent resolutions like 4K or 5K are all pieces of shit, and the 8K ones are all absurdly expensive. Not worth it at all, just to play garbage that is the VR game library. And it's not like those headsets would solve all the problems. They still have glare, God rays, they all have pancake lenses, which dim the brightness a fuck ton because the micro OLED displays are so tiny that the good aspheric lenses can't be used. And then there's the issue of the screen door effect. The black space between the pixels. Bugman will tell you that you can ignore it as you focus on the gameplay, but being the real human being with a soul and standards that you are, it's not gonna be easy to ignore. Not only does that increase the fakeness of VR, but it also makes it look like you're looking at a dirty screen when you move your head around. These black spaces also dim the overall brightness of VR, so you'll notice that in brightly lit environments, there's this dark haze, as if you're in Isle Delfino in Super Mario Sunshine at the beginning of the game. It looks utterly depressing. This thing only really starts to be unnoticeable on 8K displays, so only on premium headsets that cost upward of $2,000 will you get rid of it. There's only one good type of lens in VR, and it's the aspheric lens. Pancake lenses, as I said earlier, filter 80% of the brightness, and they also have glare issues which are very apparent in dark environments and really fog up the visuals. Fresnel lenses are absolute dog shit, but at least they're not used as much anymore. Aspheric lenses are clear, they cause minimal glare, although they don't eliminate it entirely, and allow for a lot of light to pass through, but as I said, they don't work with micro OLED because those displays are tiny, so you'll be stuck at 5K at most with those lenses perhaps, and so with screen door effect. There's no one-size-fits-all lens, which will completely eliminate the distortions in the image caused by the refraction of light, so it's easy to see the image warping around around as you move your head around, and the headset rocks unevenly with it. This doesn't blend well with VR. It's not like the distortions you might see when using glasses. They really reveal how flat the screen you're looking at is, which adds to the fakeness of VR. But it's not like OLED doesn't have drawbacks either. For having real darkness, you'll be trading brightness in fully lit environments. So walking around on a sunny day environment in VR will look strangely dark. This veil or feeling of fakeness also prevents you from noticing how big things are in VR. When I envisioned how VR would look like in my mind back in 2013, one of the most exciting things for me was that I thought I would be able to see these game environments in full scale. I wanted to stand in some of Black Mesa's gigantic chambers and experience that sheer scale, but it's just not that good in actuality. The fact you're looking at a flat screen does not give you that feeling of vertigo you get when looking up at a skyscraper, for instance. In VR, looking up at the Citadel, you can see it's tall, but you don't feel how tall it is. It looks bland. Now, a lot of these issues are solvable, right, from a technical standpoint. We can just wait a few more years and headsets with 8K res, OLED panels, decently wide FOV with aspheric lenses may finally arrive for a reasonable price, and as long as it's not a scummy piece of shit Space Toucan owned face gasket or a product that came from some CCP owned sweatshop in China or from awful companies with histories of over-promising and under-delivering, then things will improve a bit. But there are other unsolvable problems, like depth perception, which is only half done. Sure, you do get double vision on near objects if you look at far objects and vice versa, thanks to the dual displays and stereoscopic 3D, but there is no defocusing. These double images will not be defocused. That adds to eye strain and might cause headaches. Because of this, a lot of times your eyes won't be able to focus on objects that are very close to your face, and it will be mind-boggling because your eyes won't know whether to focus on the foreground or the background. And I doubt foveated rendering would do anything about this because the defocusing would be done in the image of the game or on the display. It's not done by your eyes. This artificial defocusing, if it's even possible to do that, would look extremely strange. Another limitation is that a display can't reproduce powerful lights, so you'll never look at a light bulb in VR and have the same level of brightness that burns that after image in your retina. This, along with the screen door effect, dims the lights of VR literally. VR looks pretty bad in fully sunlit environments, like I said. And you know what VR also can't do? Natural adaptation of the eye in the dark. It's artificially done by exposure in-game, so you can imagine how jarring it is when your eyes are forcefully adapted, quote-unquote, at the wrong speed and intensity. Now, I'm sure some retard in the comment section will pick just one of these points and cry about me being too nitpicky, not understanding that the issue isn't any singular point in particular, but all these things in union that create that feeling of fakeness. And whenever you notice these things, immersion is broken, and it happens all the time, man. We are always thinking, oh wow, this is all fake. I'm just a guy with a screen attached to my face. How silly. The only genres that make sense for VR are the ones that can benefit from the broader first-person possibilities that VR provides, like FPSs, racing games, simulators, walking simulators, and even rhythm games work. What doesn't work is anything that would use a third-person camera. It's not that it's impossible to do, but there's really no point in playing those games in VR, because the camera would not allow you to move freely in the VR environment, which would reduce your headset to just stereoscopic 3D goggles. Plus, the motion controllers in those games would be reduced to Wiimotes in functionality. And we all know how bad it is to play games that require finer motor skills with those things. And thus, the range of possibilities for gameplay in VR is limited. Platformers? Only in first person, so only climbing games and parkour games. Something like a Super Mario wouldn't really work. RTS, which requires optimized micro skills? Nope. Hack and slashes such as God of War or Devil May Cry, which can get pretty nutty with motion controllers? Get the hell out of here. Fighting games only in first person. Something like this would make no sense. Tabletops? Why even bother with VR? Escape rooms? Those work, but they're just glorified minigames. Another problem is that since so many people suffer from motion sickness, VR games can't really get too fast, which is why locomotion in VR is generally pretty slow. So fast-paced games like arena shooters would be financial failures due to this accessibility roadblock. And here are some some specific gameplay hurdles you'll be suffering through frequently in VR. Shove your head into a wall and it will clip into it, either giving you a view of the map from out of bounds, or some games will obscure your screen, or in Boneworks, for instance, the walls push your character back, which looks quite funny. It happens often that you'll be doing your thing and go through a wall behind you by accident, which will trigger the obscuring effect. Shove your hand through a wall in-game and your virtual hands will decouple from your real hands, or just go through the wall if the game was lazy. Either way, presence and immersion gone. Movement feels strange and immersion breaking unless you have enough space to move around IRL. If you own a warehouse, lots of people will have to rely on teleportation, which is lame, but it's the only way to not trigger immense nausea for them. Unless, of course, you're willing to buy a behemoth of a treadmill, which will take up a lot of space in your room. You look like an absolute goofball, and they don't even allow you to run or walk properly. But you have to put on a pair of special shoes and slide around a slippery surface for it to understand you're walking. It's absolute comedy. Adding more to the inconveniences, unless you have a ton of space, you'll always be moving close to your real boundaries, and when you do, the virtual boundaries that warn you you're about to ram your head into a wall in real life will appear, breaking immersion. Disabling those is not really advised though, don't do that. And unless you're willing to spend hundreds more dollars in setting up Valve's Lighthouse system, which are a requirement unfortunately for many of the off-the-shelf headsets, then the inside-out tracking with cameras will stop working if you move your controllers behind your back. The headsets have prediction algorithms, so you're still able to throw things in VR as long as you immediately do so. But if you hold your arms back there for longer than a second, you'll lose the tracking and your throw will fail. It's not like the prediction algorithms are perfect either, so the force of the throws will be pretty inconsistent. Throwing shit in VR is really weird. The weight of things doesn't make much sense most of the time. Breaking immersion again. Maybe the tracking thing isn't such a problem anymore with more premium headsets, but with the ones I had, it certainly was. The enemy or NPC AI in most VR games is on the exact same level as that of regular games as well, or they're made deliberately extremely stupid to cater to all the casuals and normies to cash in on that novelty factor. Experiencing this AI in virtual reality is again massively disjointed from what I expect from things that look like people that seemingly are standing right next to me in the same scale that I am. This is one of the most uncanny feelings I get in VR, to be able to run in circles figuratively around quote-unquote people, because the AI is so dumb. It's just not something that I can ignore on an unconscious level. This doesn't happen if they're creatures or zombies or robots, but if it looks like a human being, then their stupidity is highly immersion breaking. This feeling is not as stark in regular games for obvious reasons. The bar is lower there. You don't expect it. And this next point kind of fits here since we're talking about gameplay in games, but the direction in most VR games is just weirdly patronizing. You get this feeling playing many VR games. It seems too much like you're the star of the show, that the world is happening to you instead of you just being another guy in the game's world who has to figure out how to manage your way through it.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Winter. You're in terrible danger. People keep disappearing around here, and I hate to tell you, but they're coming for you next. Now, I'm gonna help you get out of here, but we have to move quickly.
Special report! Did you know you're special? It's true!
This doesn't happen in every game, at least not in one of them. Half-Life Alyx. In that game you kind of feel just the way you feel playing any other game. The game isn't pointing at you at all times. This is something that people in the 90s already knew. Listen to what Greg Lopiccolo, one of the guys who worked at Looking Glass, the studio that made System Shock and Thief, has to say about it.
That we would build this entire body of knowledge about the world, you know, this detailed backstory about how the world worked, but that we would never really express it. There was like very little exposition, right? There was like this attempt to obfuscate the boundary, you know, that like you never quite saw the edge of the world. That we tried to like craft this like big complex world that you were moving through, unlike a lot of adventure games and so forth, where like you're clearly in the center of the world, everything's pointed at you. That we would try to make this world where, like, to try to create this illusion of a world that had its own logic and was kind of proceeding on narratively, and that you were just a little piece of it.
There, from the mouth of someone who worked on some of the greatest and most immersive games ever made. I don't know what is with these VR games. This extreme eagerness to get you into the game already and teach you all the things you need to know about the controls and how to do this and how to do that. And all the exposition like you're the guy who's gonna save the world or something. And so here's what you have to do. And now you have to do this. And now you have to do that. Right off the bat with no world building. No space for you to figure out things by yourself. And a lot of them addressing you directly, the player, with instructions and shit. It's already bad enough when you have yellow paint in regular games, but these kinds of things in VR break the immersion so bad. I guess these people think, oh, my game is in VR, it's already immersive enough, I don't have to worry about anything else. No, it's the opposite, you idiots.
They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Well, time to move on to some other limitations. Let's see what's going on with the audio. VR games need 3D spatial audio in order to be immersive. Standing in a fully 3D present environment and having flat 2D audio feels massively disjointed. Ever wonder why we seldom see games that use actual physically accurate ray-traced audio? Well, it turns out that back in the 90s we had that for a while. It was called Audio 3D Vortex and it sounded amazing. So put your headphones on and take a listen.
Go safely and leave some of the happiness.
Impressive. Very nice.
Back then, it required a dedicated sound card because computers had 1/1000th of the processing power that we have today. But today, there's no excuse anymore. Consoles and even budget computers should be able to do it with relative ease. Listen to this one. It's a different one, a more recent but still pretty old solution called Real Space 3D. This one, I think, sounds even better. So why the hell do we not see these things anywhere? Well, because for some reason, spatial audio solutions are constantly victims of patent trolling lawfare and buyouts by companies that discontinue them or use them not for gaming but for God knows what, like the scumbags at Creative Labs who bankrupted A3D through the costs of a lawsuit, only to acquire their assets later and prop up inferior technologies like EAX, and Microsoft who killed their Direct 3D Sound API, which resulted in, gosh, decades of setbacks for 3D audio on PC. And what about Real Space? Well, it was bought out by this company here. It even had a plugin for Unity, but now it's gone. So let's take a look at this company, right? Let's check out their board of executives. Oh, what is this? What is this I notice here? Who would have thought that the tiny hats once again had a hand in making everything worse, this time by gobbling up this cool tech which otherwise could have been used to make awesome audio for actual video games? Not me, dude. I love these people. They are my greatest allies. But at least we have Steam Audio, an SDK which devs can use to make their own spatial audio solutions. And some of them sound pretty good, like the one they used in Budget Cuts, although it does fail sometimes. When I was playing, the footsteps of an enemy robot just stopped, so I thought he stopped and I had to wait, but he had already walked away long before. But yeah, the vast majority of VR games don't use this, and most that do, their solutions aren't really good. They're not on the level of the ones that I showed, because I guess there's no demand for this. The giant masses of normie consumers only care about graphics. Sound, they don't give a crap about. And the most brutal limitation of VR is the fact that you can't touch anything. You can't lean against a wall, you can't pick up an object and feel it with your hands. The best there is right now are these haptics gloves, extremely clunky. They're pretty much an exoskeleton already. They cost $5,500 only for enterprise use, with a subscription of $500 a month. They're extremely heavy and uncomfortable, and the precision of the feedback is not exactly perfect. So imagine if they were available for consumers. You spend $5,000 on this, plus the subscription, then you go in VR and you try to squeeze something, and it doesn't really feel right. Not only would your immersion be shattered, but so would your day, realizing you spend that much money on this. What I see, watching, reading, and looking up stuff, reviews, whatever, about VR things, including from enthusiasts, is a constant want for more immersion. Better haptic feedback, better force feedback, better visuals, better sound, better whatever. Like desperately wanting to get out of that uncanny valley I talked about. Because VR gets close enough for all the imperfections to be extremely bothersome, but not close enough for there to be true satisfaction, mass adoption, and a true revolutionary paradigm shift. Something as mundane as grabbing an object and feeling it accurately and reliably is something nigh impossible to do in VR. Never mind leaning against a wall and stopping, or stubbing your toe. That would require a full exoskeleton that would cost $100,000. And even then, it wouldn't be really high fidelity enough to stop that nagging feeling of fakeness that you get in VR. Meanwhile, we don't even have controllers with proper recoil for shooting guns. There's no wind, there are no smells. You don't really feel like you're in the VR world, because you can only experience visuals and sloppy audio. Save for a few games you can count with your fingers. And so do you even need to ask why VR is flopping at this point? Without the sense of touch, VR is never gonna be anything more than the Kinect 3.0. Maybe in 30 years something like that will be available for consumers for $300,000, accounting for inflation, of course. This is why some say that flight sims are the genre for VR, because all you do is sit and push buttons. Some of the more passionate have bought or assembled entire chairs that simulate the quaking and shaking and rotating of the vehicles and aircrafts. But that's it. Anything else is pretty much unfeasible. Maybe in 100 years, when Elon Musk's Neuralink becomes anything more than a glorified EEG chip, and then you'll be able to live in his Matrix utopia of Indians full of H1Bs. There are no sensations like vertigo. Only for a brief time when you're really new to VR, it kinda tricks you into feeling vertigo, but it's quickly overcome. It's not like real life vertigo that is really strong and far from overcomable. Falling from a skyscraper or falling into a chasm isn't scary in VR. Sometimes it does give you a little bit of a weird feeling, but it's pretty rare, at least for me. You don't really feel like you're in the environment your eyes are seeing. Your body is still in your room in the real world, and that is extremely noticeable and immersion breaking, because all of these things that are taken for granted when you're gaming on your monitor or TV suddenly become annoyances and things that bring you back to the real world whenever you notice them in VR, which is all the time. A noise happens in real life, your mom calls you.
Mom! I said, Mom! Don't ever talk to me that way! God damn it, Mom!
The fucking refrigerator, you hear the fucking humming of the light, or the ceiling fan or the air conditioner is turned on in your room, which is something that you have to do a lot when you play in VR, because putting that thing on your head makes you all hot and sweaty. And notice these things and it's gone, like you're back in the real world. So VR does not offer you the super immersive experience you might expect. Hell, there are so many features missing from a real experience It's absolutely impossible to ignore as you're playing it. Hell, don't do any roller coaster ride in VR because you're going to be so disappointed that it's going to make you instantly regret having bought a VR headset. So curb your expectations for that thing if you're gonna buy it. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that super insane experience you might be expecting. Plus, of course, you're gonna have to be dealing with all the inconveniences as you're playing. Every time you feel like playing it, you're gonna have to see if it has battery. You're gonna have to see if the controllers are charged. You're gonna have to see if the lenses are clean. You're gonna have to clear the space that you're gonna play on, and be careful not to stub your foot into something as you're playing, or smash your monitor or something else with your hands as you're waving the controllers around, and deal with bloat and bad proprietary software if you're not going for the Steam frame, and even then and just assuming it's gonna solve these problems. And more inconveniences. For what? There are no good games, man. Here are some positives of VR. Playing FPSs is pretty fun. Shooting guns in VR is pretty interesting, even though there's no recoil, which is the most fun part of shooting guns in real life. It's a completely different experience from shooting guns in regular FPS games. Melee combat in VR is also pretty interesting, to say the least. Not as good as shooting because you can't really feel the collision of anything, but still, it can be quite satisfying. When playing games with friends over the internet, the sensation that they're there close to you is much better than just joining a Discord call. Horror games in VR are a little scarier, sure, at least for a little bit. So for those who are desensitized to horror like me, playing them in VR can remind you for a bit the feeling of being scared playing a horror game. Now this one could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you're looking for, but VR does tire you out, so at least it's light exercise. I can't really say for myself because I'm not really a simulator guy, but driving games in VR or flight sims or whatever, if you have a wheel with force feedback and shit, sounds pretty good. The sensation of presence is interesting. It's not all that, but at least it's an interesting thing for the novelty. And of course, using VR for other things like watching a movie in a virtual cinema can be more immersive. Using VR as a substitute of multiple screens, I'm not really a fan of, but I can see the appeal. Not really cool at less than 5K res though. And those are the only good things that I can think of as I used VR over the years, so it's not really that much. Not enough to outweigh how bothersome VR is to use. Oh, and for the gooners out there, I almost forgot, there's VR corn, but that's not really a good thing now, is it? So what's the point of this video? To complain? Well, yeah, that's what I do. I complain about video games on the internet.
Just being honest.
Except VR, right as it came back, over time has become less and less about video games. Back when it was about video games, being made for video games, with the backing of gamers, John Carmack, Valve, then yeah, it was pretty cool and promising. But very soon, the wrong people started to get involved. And at that point, it was pretty clear that VR was not going to be something mainly about video games anymore.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah.
Huh? The well was poisoned pretty early on and transformed into normie slop, and even worse, global homo zog slop, with attempts to use it to create the ultimate form of bread and circus with the metaverse.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
This is wild.
So you could forget about your miserable existence, which was made miserable by them, as you live like a vegetable in VR, while they shoot you up with RNA and feed bugs straight into your veins in your pod that you'll live in. So I'm not gonna feed you any bullshit about how I think that VR is awesome and it has so much potential and I just want it to succeed, because frankly I don't give a shit at best. At worst I want it to fail, because as it is now, now?
Thinking so hard about wanting to be sat on for at least an hour while I give some some food.
So yeah, this is why I think VR is flopping. So should you buy a VR headset in 2025?
No.
Should you buy a Steam frame once it comes out? Depends. I wouldn't buy it if it ends up costing over 600 bucks. Also, keep an eye on the pixel density for the displays on that thing. Since it's only 4K, if the pixel density is anything less than 23 ppd, it's probably gonna look like ass. So yeah, this is just wishful thinking, but maybe Valve can renew the VR environment again. VR made by actual honest people and passionate about games. None of that weird shit. Maybe they'll make another good game. Who knows? Anyway, I might put up a review of the Thief Legacy of Shadows game. I wish that game were not only for VR, but what can I do? Take it easy. I'll see you later.
Let me out!